On the other side of our studio, Emma James, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Starting with the, some surprising reactions varied to the death of the murder cult leader, Charles Manson.
Yes, absolutely. It is odd when you hear of someone who's convicted of heinous crimes, who's been in jail for more than 40 years, and not everybody is reacting in quite the way that you might imagine. One of the more expected, normal, in inverted commas, reactions came from the New York Post. This was their front page today. A picture of Charles Manson as he looked back in the 1960s. Evil Dead, their headline. Make room, Satan. Charles Manson is finally going to hell. Now, that might be what you would expect to see. Some people were a little surprised by the Los Angeles Times, who chose to do what is a very traditional obituary, really, of him. Some didn't appreciate the treatment and took to Twitter to talk about it. I'd rather remember Sharon Tate and the victims. Sharon Tate, of course, was 8.5 months pregnant when she was killed by the followers of Charles Manson. Mia Farrow, the actress, also tweeting her thoughts with her beautiful, sweet friend Sharon Tate and with each of Manson's victims. However, taking a look at the LA Times obituary, it's perhaps a little harsh to write it off as being done like a traditional obit, because it actually looks very thoroughly at the man and also the myth behind him. This is a quote from one of the lead prosecutor, Vincent Bugliosi, who said that Manson became a metaphor for evil and evil has its allure. Now, what is interesting to note, though, is that Vincent Bugliosi actually played his own role, really, in creating and maintaining the mythology around Charles Manson, because he wrote a book in the 70s about having led the prosecution against him. That then became a made-for-TV movie, and when that was screened in 1976, more than 50 million people watched that programme, which really gives you an idea, I suppose, of how much the US was still in the thrall of this story, the horror of it all. And many, many other portrayals, as detailed here in Hollywood Reporter, have really kept his image alive for many more generations to come. Now, in the LA Times obit, there was another quote that particularly jumped out at me. There are these young people today who are intrigued by his mystique, but they don't know what he's really about, what he really did. Now, that's another person who worked on the prosecution. And he talks about the fact that in the 1980s, he turned up to one of the parole hearings for Charles Manson and found that there were 40 Satan worshippers waiting outside. So he does attract a certain type of person who perhaps is looking for somebody to give them inspiration.
Looking at social media then, it seems that this cult of the Manson family not entirely dead.
No, amazingly not. When you look on social media, there are plenty of tweets out there. Not the majority, I will say. I don't want to exaggerate what's going on here, but certainly lots of people talking about the hashtag RIP Charles Manson. We lost an American hero, says this Twitter user. This one says, my graduation cap was literally a quote by him, and then a sort of downturned, sort of non-smiley face following it. The quote that she had on her cap, if you're going to do something, do it well and leave something witchy behind. And this person says, good night, sweet Prince, rather creepily. And the last word on this, R.I.P. Charles Manson, a great man who never killed anyone. Now, that's an account that's actually been created today just to push forward the quotes of Charles Manson. It's probably worth noting that some people are just trying to be troublemakers, really, in all this. Others have actually chosen to back Charles Manson because they liked his idea of creating a race war. So some very, very divisive thoughts out there. Looking elsewhere, though, some people have been using the hashtag RIP Charles Manson, and when it began to trend, people actually became a little confused and a little angry about it. Lots of people tweeting images like this, just not understanding what on earth is going on. This is another one. The RIPs I see for Charles Manson better stand for rot in pieces. However, there's another reason why some people were tweeting it, and it wasn't out of a sense of being morbidly fascinated. It was simply not knowing who on earth they were talking about. People like this one. Charles Manson is dead. He's a great artist that we have lost today. That is not not Charles Manson, that is Marilyn Manson. Lots of people tweeting this, and they've gone to the trouble of actually finding a photograph of Marilyn Manson, and it still hasn't dawned on them that that is not Charles Manson. It is worth noting, though, that there is a link between the two in a sense, because that is a stage name. His real name is Brian Warner, and he chose the name because he said he wanted to express the balance between good and evil. Marilyn Monroe had a dark side, just as Charles Manson has a good, intelligent side. So there you go, some questionable thoughts there from Marilyn Manson too.
Questionable indeed. The murders back in 1969 did bring one positive change to American society, and many have been reflecting on that.
Yes, a lot of articles out there today talking about, in particular, the mother of Sharon Tate, Doris Tate, who became something of a reluctant champion for the victims. And this article talking about how the unintended positive consequence of these murders is that it actually led to the Victims' Bill of Rights. Doris Tate actually spoke at a parole hearing for one of the killers, saying, "What mercy did you show my daughter when she was begging for her life? When will I come up for parole?"
Emma James with Media Watch, thank you very much indeed. And